Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unboxed. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us today. What I want to do is I want us to look at our last broadcast, specifically at step 10. And step 10, if you remember, is simply not making your salvation, your maturity, dependent on the functioning of others. And what I want to do today is I want to discuss our responsibility towards others. So I've been talking about not being dependent on others. I want to talk about our responsibility toward others. We are not other people's savior, and we are not dependent on them for our salvation. However, I want to talk about the 5 things that we are responsible for and how mature interdependence looks. And sorry, I want to talk about the four things that we are responsible for and how mature interdependence looks. So stick around as we unbox your leadership by unboxing relationships. I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and relationship coach. And welcome to Unboxed, a frank and straightforward conversation about relationships. We're going to talk about family, church, workplace, and all other types of relationships. Join me for the next few moments as we unbox the power and potential of relationships and help you to live your best life. All right. Welcome. Before we get started, do me a huge favor. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. That's right. Like, subscribe, and share. And if you're listening to this via podcast, the web address is www.swg-unbox.org. That's swg-unbox.org. So today I want to close out our discussion on step number 10, which is, as you remember, making your salvation, your maturity, dependent on the functioning of others. And as we learned, a revised way of saying that is not making your life goals and your maturity dependent on the functioning of others. Not making your life goals and your maturity dependent on the functioning of others. And there is a major difference between dependence and interdependence. And I want to kind of clarify that as I get into responsibility today. There's a major difference between dependence and interdependence. Since we already talked about dependence, let me focus on interdependence. What is interdependence? As humans, we are dependent or interdependent on each other for basic human survival. In other words, we are dependent on each other physically and administratively. Humans, and especially when you talk about family and the family emotional system, we are interconnected. And I guess that's a better word than dependent. We are interconnected through our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our fantasies, our associations, as well as our connections. And because of this interconnectedness, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. When you're part of a family, everybody eats at this, everybody eats together, and or everybody eats and they have to share common space and whatever it may be. There is a certain interconnectedness. And because of this interconnectedness and because of this interdependency, we have a tendency to slip from interdependent to being dependent, from being interdependent to being dependent. And one way to minimize our tendency to slip is to think about what humans are responsible for. And of course, more specifically, to think about what I am responsible for. So I don't want to slip because I'm interconnected with people. I don't want to move from interdependence or interconnectedness to dependency, because that can happen so quickly and so imperceivably. So then the $1 million question is, how do I avoid this? And the answer again is think about what it is that as a human being, I am responsible for. As a human being, what am I responsible for? And this again, as I enter into this thinking space and become clear about this, this helps us to really be able to minimize the tendency to slip into to slip into dependency. So I have four things that I have identified that every human is responsible for. And as I go through these four, I want you to think about if there are more that are out there. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. What are those four things that we are interdependent on? Wow. And I tell you, I'm going to pull my thing up in just a second. This is, I want you to be able to look at this. I apologize. Of course, I want you to be able to look at this. So give me just 1 second while I pull this up. Technology is awesome, and the guy who usually does this is not with us. And that guy who usually does it is my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. All right, here we go. Wow, there we are. What are the 4 things that we're responsible for? Number 1, we are responsible for not causing harm to others in our system. We are responsible for not causing harm to others in our system. And I kind of want you just to chew on that. So that I don't become dependent, let me make sure I understand. I am responsible for not causing harm to others in my system, others that I'm in relationship with. Number 2, we are responsible for caring for those in our system that are unable to care for themselves. And I put that word unable in bold, unable to care for themselves. That is what I'm responsible for. So think about that from the perspective of a parent. Think about that as from the perspective of a child and their aging parents. Think about that from the perspective of someone who interacts with those with disabilities. You see where I'm coming from? So I am responsible for caring for those in my system that are unable to care for themselves. Number 3, we are responsible for functioning at our highest emotional level. So this is what I'm responsible for. I'm not dependent on you. I'm responsible for not harming others. I am responsible for caring for those who are unable to care for themselves. That's in my relationship system. I am responsible for functioning at my highest emotional level. And we are responsible for taking ownership of our actions. I am responsible for taking ownership of my actions. And I want you just to think about this for a moment, especially as a leader. When I began to understand and to focus and to be intentional about those things that I am responsible for, one of the things that it does is it minimizes, that human tendency in our interconnectedness to fall into dependency and to depend on someone else for my salvation. I wanted to leave that up there for a second because I want you to see that this is what we are responsible for. We're responsible for not causing harm to others in our system. We're responsible for caring for those in our system who are unable to care for themselves. We are responsible for functioning at our highest emotional level, and we are responsible for taking ownership of our actions. Those are the things that we are responsible for. And how well you fulfill your responsibility as a member of the human family will determine how well you will do not slipping from interdependence to dependency. Again, what we do not want to do is we do not want to be dependent on others for our salvation. I want you to get that now. We do not want to be dependent on others for our life goals. We do not want to be dependent on others for our emotional maturity. And the way that I ensure that I don't is by making sure that I take responsibility and that I understand what it is that I am responsible for and that I take responsibility. And how well I do that will determine how likely I am not to slip into dependency, to slip into codependency. We can minimize our human tendency toward dependency by taking ownership of our own responsibility. Man, that sounds like a rap, doesn't it? We can minimize our human tendency toward dependency by taking ownership of our responsibilities. Man, all right, I might go into rapping now that you mention it. This is literally how we unbox our leadership. We do it by unboxing relationships. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.
Seasoned with Grace, Unboxed also provides healthy relationship training and leadership development for businesses, churches, and community organizations. For a free consultation to discuss your team's needs, please contact us at our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org.